Someone right now, maybe someone you know, maybe a stranger, maybe someone you have to see every single day, has figured out how to control you. Not with force, not with money, not with any kind of formal authority over your life. They control you with something far simpler and far more devastating. They know how to make you react. They say something and you snap. They push a button and you explode. They show up in a room and your entire emotional state shifts. They send a message and you spend the next 4 hours composing the perfect response in your head instead of living your life. They get inside your head and they stay there. Rent-free, uninvited, eating your peace 1 hour at a time. And the worst part? They don't even have to be present. The damage runs on autopilot. You do the work for them. Now let me ask you something that might genuinely change your life if you answer it honestly. When did you give them that power? Because you did give it. Not consciously, not deliberately, but through years of unexamined reactive habits, through never being taught that the space between what someone does to you and how you respond is entirely yours. You handed over something priceless. Your mental autonomy, your emotional sovereignty, the authority over your own inner state. Today that ends. What I am about to give you are 15 Stoic laws, not suggestions, not tips, not feel-good affirmations, laws. Forged in the most pressure-tested philosophy in human history. Used by emperors who commanded armies, by slaves who commanded themselves, by men and women who faced genuine, life-altering adversity, and came out the other side not bitter and broken, but absolutely, structurally, unshakably calm. This is how you take back control, not of them, of yourself, which is the only control that has ever mattered. Let's go. Law 1. Their weapon reveals their wound. Let's start with the most liberating truth in this entire video. The one that, once it truly lands, will make you immune to a category of pain you have been carrying for years. Every insult directed at you is a precise and involuntary map of the person delivering it. Not a map of you, a map of them. Their frustrations, their failures, their unspoken fears, their desperate, unmet need to feel significant in a world that has made them feel otherwise. When someone goes out of their way to cut you down, to humiliate you, to make you feel small, they are not demonstrating power. They are demonstrating need. The need to diminish others because building themselves has proven too difficult. The need to control the external because the internal is completely out of their hands. Think about the most psychologically secure people you have ever encountered. The ones who are genuinely at peace with themselves, with their choices, with their place in the world. Do they spend their energy attacking others? Do they craft insults, manufacture conflict, or engineer situations designed to make someone else feel worthless? They don't. Because they have no reason to. A cup that is full does not reach for yours. Epictetus saw this with the unclouded eyes of someone who had survived the worst that human cruelty could produce. As a slave, a person whose very body was legally someone else's property. He watched his captors with philosophical detachment and concluded something that must have been profoundly difficult to arrive at from that position. The most dangerous prison in any room is not the one restraining the slave. It is the one built inside the master. The prison of unmastered passion, of ego so fragile, it requires the subjugation of others to feel intact. The person who attacks you is imprisoned. They are not free. They are being driven by forces they do not govern, toward behaviors that reveal everything about their inner poverty and nothing about your worth. Let their weapon be their confession. Let their insult be their autobiography, and let none of it have the slightest bearing on who you know yourself to be. Law 2. Static is not signal. Stop treating it like one. There is a frequency that provocateurs broadcast on, and the only reason it reaches you, the only reason it produces any effect whatsoever, is that somewhere, at some point, you tuned your receiver to that frequency and left it there. That is what Stoic philosophy asks you to change. Not the broadcast. You cannot control what other people transmit. The receiver. The internal settings that determine what gets processed as meaningful and what gets filtered as noise. Here is the truth about verbal attacks that the Stoics understood with absolute precision. They carry no inherent meaning. A string of words arranged to humiliate you is, at its physical foundation, vibrations of air. Sound waves. It becomes meaning. It becomes something that can wound you, destabilize you, occupy your mind for days. Only through the process of interpretation. Your interpretation, the one you perform so automatically that it feels like the meaning was in the words themselves rather than assembled by you. The moment you recognize this, really recognize it, not just agree with it abstractly, everything changes. Because you realize that the process of interpretation is not automatic. It is a skill, and like every skill, it can be retrained. Marcus Aurelius made a practice of examining every impression that arose in his mind before acting on it. He called this testing the impression, holding it up to rational scrutiny before allowing it to produce emotional or behavioral consequence. Is this true? Does this deserve the weight I am about to give it? What am I choosing to believe right now? And is that choice serving me? That examination is the difference between a signal and static. A signal contains genuine information, something that, honestly assessed, has value or requires genuine response. Static is noise wearing the costume of signal. It arrives with urgency and force, designed to feel important, engineered to demand reaction. Your job is to tell the difference. And then, this is the critical part, to let the static pass through you the way radio waves pass through walls, without resistance, without engagement, without the slightest disruption to what is happening on the other side. Not every transmission deserves a receiver. Most don't. Stop providing one. Law 3. The moment you react, they win. Permanently. I need you to understand exactly what is at stake in the moment between a provocation and your response. Because most people treat it as a minor social moment, a flash of irritation, a sharp word, an argument that flares and fades. They don't see what is actually being transferred. What is being transferred is control. When you react impulsively to a provocation, when the anger fires before judgment has any say, when the words come out hot and unfiltered, when you match their energy and enter the confrontation on their terms, you have completed a transfer of authority. You have handed the steering wheel of your behavior to someone who does not have your best interests at heart. Someone who may not even know you. Someone who pressed a button they knew or guessed would work and watched it work perfectly. And here is what makes this genuinely serious. It is not just about this moment. Every time you demonstrate that you can be moved, that your composure is available to be taken by whoever applies sufficient pressure, you are training the people around you in how to handle you. You are showing them where the buttons are. You are confirming that the buttons work. And you are guaranteeing that they will be pressed again. Marcus Aurelius understood this as both a personal and a political reality. An emperor who could be goaded into rage by a provocative senator, manipulated into poor decisions by a hostile general, destabilized by the opinions of the crowd. That emperor was not governing his empire. His empire was governing him. His entire philosophical project was the reclamation of self-governance. The insistence, practiced daily in the pages of his meditations, that nothing external would be permitted to operate the controls. The Stoic term for this is hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the commanding intelligence at the center of the self that is supposed to be directing the show. And the entire discipline of Stoic practice is the protection and strengthening of that faculty. The refusal, under any circumstances, to let it be hijacked. Every impulsive reaction is a hijacking. Every deliberate pause and chosen response is a reclamation. And the person who reclaims their hegemonikon consistently, who establishes beyond any doubt that their responses come from them and not from whoever pushed them last, is a person who cannot be controlled. Become that person. Starting with the next provocation, which is coming, and which you are now prepared for. Law 4, 3 seconds is the price of sovereignty. Your brain has a betrayal built into it, not a malfunction, a feature. One that served your ancestors extraordinarily well and serves you in the context of social provocation almost not at all. It is called the amygdala response, and it works like this. The moment your brain registers a social threat, an insult, a challenge, a deliberate attempt to destabilize you, it activates before your conscious mind has any awareness that something has happened. Cortisol, adrenaline, heart rate elevation, prefrontal cortex suppression. You are now, neurologically speaking, operating in crisis mode. Your most sophisticated thinking, the part that considers consequences, applies values, chooses words with precision, has been temporarily taken offline. And what is running instead is the oldest, fastest, least nuanced software available. Software that, in its original environment, kept you alive. Software that, in a meeting room or a family dinner or an online comment section, keeps you in trouble. The 3-second rule is the circuit breaker. 3 seconds of deliberate non-response, not silence born of uncertainty, but a pause born of absolute command, is enough to begin the neurochemical retreat, enough to let the first surge of cortisol start its descent. Enough for the prefrontal cortex to come back online, and for your actual intelligence, your actual values, your actual best judgment to re-enter the conversation. Seneca called delay the greatest cure for the passions, not because delay is passive, but because the version of you that responds after 3 seconds of deliberate pause is categorically, measurably, demonstrably a better decision maker than the version acting in the first second of activation. Here is your instruction. Build this in the low-stakes moments. The minor irritation at home, the passive-aggressive comment from a coworker, the email that raises your temperature before your coffee has cooled. Every time, every single time, impose the 3-second pause. You are not rehearsing patience. You are installing new architecture. And architecture, once built, holds even when conditions turn severe. 3 seconds is the price of sovereignty. It is the cheapest price ever charged for something this valuable. Law 5, the test is the point. Don't miss it. Here is the reframe that will permanently change how you experience being provoked. And I want you to hold it, examine it, and decide whether it is true. Because I believe it is. And I think once you see it, you will too. The moment someone tries to provoke you is not an interruption to your growth. It is the only place where your growth can actually happen. Think about what you are trying to build when you work on emotional mastery. You are trying to build equanimity, the capacity to remain centered, measured, and clear in the middle of conditions that are actively working to destroy your center. You are trying to build composure under pressure, the ability to access your best self specifically when circumstances are doing their best to produce your worst. Now tell me, where exactly do you think those qualities get built? Not in the comfortable conversations, not in the interactions where everyone is agreeable and the stakes are low and your composure was never really required. Those moments are fine. But they are not the forge. The forge is the confrontation, the provocation. The moment someone deliberately applies pressure to see what is inside you, and you get to discover in real time whether what is inside you is actually what you have been building. Epictetus was explicit and uncompromising on this. He taught that the philosophical life is not conducted in a classroom. It is conducted in the marketplace, in the Senate, at the dinner table, in every real-world situation where the principles you have been studying get tested against actual conditions. The philosophy that has only been read and never lived is not philosophy. It is preparation for philosophy. And preparation that never arrives at the test is just reading. Every provocation is the test arriving. Every difficult person is a professor in the curriculum you signed up for when you decided you wanted to be someone who cannot be moved. And every time you hold your composure in a moment that genuinely challenged it, every time you pass the test that was designed to break you, you add something permanent to your character that comfortable circumstances could never have provided. Stop dreading the test. You prepared for this. Show up. Law 6. Ground zero is always the breath at when everything floods, when the provocation lands and the emotion surges and the mind starts running in 17 directions at once. There is exactly one thing available to you that exists purely in the present moment, that costs nothing, that requires no preparation, and that has the neurological power to begin pulling you back from the edge of reaction. Your breath. Not because breathing is magical, because of precise physiology. Your autonomic nervous system, the system governing your stress response, is almost entirely automatic and not subject to conscious control. Almost. The one exception is respiration. You can breathe voluntarily. And because breath is both automatic and voluntary, it is the one lever you have direct access to on the machinery of your own nervous system. A slow, deliberate exhale, longer than the inhale, full, controlled, activates the vagus nerve and initiates the parasympathetic response. This is not relaxation in the soft sense. This is a physiological signal to your nervous system that the threat has passed, that the crisis mode is no longer required, that the prefrontal cortex can return to operation. One breath, executed correctly, begins the measurable descent of the cortisol spike that was driving your reactive impulse. The Stoics described this in the language of philosophy rather than physiology, but they were pointing at the same reality. Prosoch, watchful self-attention, always begins with the body, with the awareness of what is physically happening right now. Before analysis, before reframe, before any sophisticated philosophical intervention, simply, what is my body doing? What does this breath feel like? Where am I, physically, in this moment? That question is a portal. It cuts through the mental noise instantly because it demands presence. And presence is the one place where your reactive mind loses its authority. When provocation arrives and the flood begins, don't try to think through it. Breathe through it. 1 slow, deliberate breath, 4 counts in, 2 held, 6 out. Feel it arrive. Feel it leave. And feel, in the space it creates, the ground coming back under your feet. The breath is always there. It is always available. It is waiting for you to remember it. Law 7. Nothing enters without a warrant. There is a legal principle that applies perfectly to the architecture of a well-governed mind. Nothing enters without authorization, without cause, without a deliberate decision from the authority inside to grant access. External hostility, in all its forms, at all its intensities, is knocking at the door of your interior life constantly. The question is never whether it will knock. The question is whether you have learned to staff the door. Here is what most people are doing instead. They have left the door wide open. Every knock gets an immediate answer. Every hostile act gets immediate access. Every insult walks straight in, finds a seat at the table of their self-concept, and stays for dinner. And then they wonder why they feel so crowded inside. Why there is so little peace. Why they are constantly managing the emotional consequences of other people's behavior. The inner citadel, the concept that Marcus Aurelius returned to throughout his meditations as the central image of his psychological philosophy, is not a fortress built for isolation. It is a fortress built for sovereignty, for the deliberate, conscious governance of what is allowed to affect your inner state, for the practical recognition that external events are neutral until you assign them meaning, and that the assignment of meaning is always, without exception, within your jurisdiction. Marcus wrote, "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are. Not to pretend they aren't there. To see them clearly, and from that clear seeing, to make a deliberate choice about what they deserve from you. A hostile word is an event in the external world. It becomes a wound only if you issue it a warrant. Only if you authorize it to enter, to be processed as truth, to be given the standing to affect how you feel about yourself. Revoke the warrant, not because you are suppressing something, but because you have examined the evidence and found it insufficient. Nothing enters your citadel without your authorization. Start enforcing that law with the seriousness it deserves. Law 8. The highest response is to become unrecognizable to the person who attacked you. Marcus Aurelius wrote something in his private journals that has outlasted every enemy he ever faced. Every political adversary who tried to use him, every person who doubted or attacked or attempted to diminish him. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. I want to unpack what this actually means, because it is far more radical and far more powerful than it sounds on the surface. It doesn't mean be better than them. It doesn't mean rise above in a way that still positions them as the reference point. It means become so genuinely, fundamentally different in character, so thoroughly committed to a different way of being, that the comparison itself becomes irrelevant. That the person who attacked you is no longer even operating in the same dimension of existence as the person you have become. Think about what retaliation actually costs you. When you respond to an attack in kind, when you match their pettiness, mirror their cruelty, descend to the level where they are operating, you have accomplished one thing. You have confirmed that their way of engaging with the world has a place in yours. You have agreed, implicitly and demonstrably, that given sufficient provocation, you will become what you claim to oppose. The Stoic alternative asks something harder. It asks you to look at the person who attacked you, to see the smallness, the pain, the fundamental limitation of someone who can only feel significant by diminishing others. And to respond not with matching energy, but with the quiet, unshakable commitment to never become that. Not as an act of superiority, as an act of genuine self-respect, as the recognition that you have a self-worth protecting from contamination by what was directed at you, and that the most complete protection available is not retaliation, but transformation. Be unlike them, not eventually, not after you've had your moment of revenge. Now, in this response, in the choice you make in the next 30 seconds about who you are going to be, in the face of what just happened. That choice, made now and made consistently, is how you become unrecognizable to the person who thought they knew which buttons to press. Law 9. Anchor your identity. Where no one has a key. The most vulnerable self-concept in any confrontation is the one that was built outside of itself. Here's what I mean. Most people have constructed their sense of who they are from external materials. What they have achieved, what others have said about them, the roles they perform, and the approval they receive for performing them. The titles, the recognition, the validation of people whose opinion they have decided matters. And here is the catastrophic structural problem with that construction. The same hands that built it have access to it. The people whose approval created your sense of worth can, with equal facility, revoke it. The audience that celebrated you can turn. The recognition that made you feel real can be withdrawn. And when it is, when the provocation lands on a self-concept built from these external bricks, it finds no wall. It finds a structure made of other people's opinions, and it walks right through. The Stoics prescribed a completely different architectural approach. Build your identity not from what others think of you, but from what you actually know about yourself. From your values, the principles you have consciously chosen to live by. From your commitments, the promises you have made to yourself and kept. From your conscience, the internal authority that knows, with a certainty no external voice can override, whether you are living in alignment with the person you have decided to be. Seneca wrote that a person who seeks the approval of others for their sense of worth has placed their peace in the most volatile market available. The market of human opinion fluctuates constantly, with politics, with mood, with self-interest, with information that has nothing to do with your actual character. Build your identity where that market cannot reach. In the internal knowledge, examined, honest, regularly updated through genuine self-reflection of who you are and whether you are living it. That knowledge is yours completely. No insult can revise it. No provocation can reach it. No hostile verdict from a person who has never had access to your interior can change what you know to be true about yourself. Anchor there, and watch how little the external weather can move you. Law 10. Stillness is dominance. Learn to wear it. There is a profound misunderstanding in modern culture about what power looks like in conflict. The assumption, reinforced by every argument you have ever watched, every confrontation you have seen play out online, every social dynamic where someone was publicly challenged, is that power responds. That strength defends itself. That the person who says nothing has conceded the field. The Stoics knew better. And anyone who has ever been on the receiving end of genuine, unshakable stillness in a moment of conflict knows it from direct experience. There is nothing more commanding in a confrontation than a person who simply will not be moved. Not visibly unmoved, actually unmoved. not performing composure while seething inside, genuinely, structurally at rest in a way that no volume, no aggression, no escalation can reach. Because that quality, that real, earned, deeply built stillness communicates something that no comeback ever can. It communicates that this person's peace does not depend on the outcome of this exchange, that their sense of self is not on the table, that they have nothing to defend because nothing that could be threatened here is actually at risk. That is dominance in its purest form, not the dominance of the person who outshouts or outwits or outmaneuvers, the dominance of the person who cannot be reached. And consider the mechanics of the silence from the other side. The provocateur needs a reaction. Their entire strategy, whether conscious or not, depends on producing one. The insult was crafted, or the hostile act was performed, because it was expected to generate something. Anger, defensiveness, hurt, retaliation, anything that confirms the attack landed and the power dynamic they were attempting to establish is real. When you provide nothing, when the silence that follows their aggression is full and steady and entirely devoid of the discomfort they were counting on, they have nowhere to go. Their aggression hangs in the air between you, and its weight falls back entirely on them. Wear stillness like armor. Let it become your first response. Let silence be the default from which you choose whether to speak, not the last resort you arrive at after everything else has failed. In the economy of power and calm, stillness compounds. Every time you choose it, it becomes more available, more natural, more completely yours. Law 11. The attack is a gift. Here is how to open it. This is the law that provocateurs will never understand. And the reason they will never understand it is that it requires a relationship with difficulty that is completely foreign to the way most people are wired. It requires you to be grateful for the attack. Stay with me, because this is not toxic positivity, and it is not the spiritual bypassing of genuine pain. It is a precise and practical recognition that every provocation carries something of genuine value. Information about where you are still vulnerable, and therefore where you still have work to do. The Stoic virtue of temperance, the capacity to maintain balance and measured response under conditions actively designed to strip it from you, is not a quality you can develop in the absence of those conditions. You cannot practice temperance when nothing is testing your patience. You cannot build composure in an environment that makes no demands on your composure. The virtue is built in the fire. The fire is the gift. This is what Epictetus meant when he told his students to welcome difficulty, not in spite of its demands, but because of them. Not because suffering is good, but because the response to suffering, when that response is chosen deliberately, when it is governed by philosophical principle rather than primitive reaction, is the mechanism through which the best qualities of human character are actually forged. Every attack is therefore a laboratory, a live, real-stakes test of exactly the qualities you are most deliberately trying to build. And the data it produces, the precise, specific information about where your composure held and where it didn't, about which insecurity found a crack and which ones found solid wall, is information that no comfortable conversation could ever generate. Open the gift. After every confrontation, after the heat is gone and the clarity returns, sit with it. Examine it. Ask what it tested, what it revealed, what it showed you about the work still ahead. And then use that information to build something that the next attack will find already complete. The provocateur thought they were hurting you. They were actually helping you, whether they meant to or not. Let them. Law 12, they are a force of nature. You are the landscape. Every confrontation has a natural element. A force that moves, that arrives without asking permission, that impacts whatever is in its path and then continues on its way. That force is the provocateur, the person driven by their own inner weather, broadcasting their turbulence outward, reaching for reactions because reactions are the only way they know to feel that they exist. And then there is you. The Stoic invitation, the deepest, most mature, most genuinely powerful orientation available in any conflict, is to stop experiencing yourself as another force that must respond to force, and to start experiencing yourself as the landscape, not passive, not absent, but fundamentally, constitutionally different in kind from what is moving through you. Landscapes do not argue with weather. They do not take storms personally. They do not reorganize themselves in response to every passing wind. They are what they are, shaped by time, by deliberate formation, by forces far more enduring than any single storm. And they remain what they are after the storm has passed. Marcus Aurelius returned to this orientation constantly. He saw the difficult people in his life, the senators who schemed, the generals who disappointed, the advisors who deceived, not as enemies to be defeated, but as phenomena to be understood and navigated. He depersonalized them. Not coldly, he maintained deep care for the people under his governance, but in the specific sense of refusing to take their behavior as a statement about him. They were what they were. He was what he chose to be. And those two things existed in entirely different registers. This depersonalization is the final, steepest layer of absolute calm. It is the shift from this person is attacking me to this person is in pain, and that pain is currently aimed in my direction. It is the recognition that the storm does not know your name, that the force moving through this confrontation was never about you in the way your ego experienced it. From that recognition, genuinely inhabited, not just intellectually agreed with, comes something that no technique and no strategy can fully produce. A peace so foundational, so deeply grounded in an accurate understanding of what is actually happening, that it does not require defense. The storm moves through. The landscape remains. That is absolute calm. That is the end of being controlled. Law 13. Map the hit. Then seal the opening. There is a forensic practice available to everyone who is genuinely committed to becoming uncontrollable, and almost no one uses it, not because it is complex, but because it is uncomfortable. It requires you to look honestly at a moment of vulnerability and resist the ego's urgent demand to explain it away. Here it is. After every confrontation that produced a significant emotional response, ask one precise question. Not why were they wrong, and not how should I have responded. Those questions serve the ego, not the growth. The question is, what specifically did that hit? Because here is the truth that provocateurs, whether consciously or intuitively, understand and exploit. The insults that land, that stick, that sit with you long after the confrontation is over, are the ones that found something real. An insecurity, a doubt, a fear about yourself that you have been carrying without examining, a story about your worth or your capability or your value that was already running quietly in the background, and which the attack merely made audible. The attack did not create the vulnerability. It located it. That location is the most valuable information available to you in the aftermath of a confrontation. because a vulnerability that has been identified can be worked on. A wound that has been named can be tended. An insecurity that has been brought into the clear light of conscious examination immediately loses a significant portion of its power, because most insecurities derive their authority from operating in the dark. This is the Stoic practice of radical self-honesty applied to conflict. It is not comfortable. The ego will resist it at every turn, insisting that the problem was them and not anything inside you. But the ego's comfort is not the objective here. Your freedom is: map every hit with precision, then do the work. Examine the insecurity at its root. Ask whether it is based on genuine evidence or on old, inherited, no longer applicable stories. Decide what you actually believe about yourself in that area, based on who you are right now, not on who you were told you were. And seal the opening so thoroughly that the next attempt to exploit it finds nothing there. They found a crack. You found a construction site. Get to work. Law 14. Your peace is non-negotiable. Treat it that way. Most people treat their inner peace as a variable, something that fluctuates with circumstances, rises when things go well, and crashes when someone attacks or provokes or fails to treat them with the respect they deserve. Something contingent, something earned in good moments and lost in bad ones. The Stoics proposed a completely different relationship with peace, one that requires a shift so fundamental it feels almost radical when you first encounter it. Your peace is not a reward for favorable circumstances. It is a commitment that precedes all circumstances. It is a decision you make, not in the moment of confrontation, when the emotion is running and the stakes feel high, but before, in the quiet, in the deliberate, sober recognition that your inner peace is the most valuable thing you own, that it is the foundation from which everything else in your life is built, and that you are simply not willing to trade it for any retaliation, for any vindication, for any victory in any exchange with anyone who tried to take it from you. This is not complacency. This is not the resignation of someone who has given up on justice or dignity or standing up for themselves. It is the recognition, hard-won and genuinely philosophical, that the pursuit of retaliation almost never produces the peace it promises, and almost always costs the peace it was supposed to restore. Seneca wrote that the wise person chooses their battles not on the basis of who deserves to be fought, but on the basis of what the fight will cost them. And the cost of sustained reactive engagement with provocateurs, the mental energy, the emotional capital, the hours of replay and rehearsal and imagined confrontation, is always paid out of your peace account. Always. Regardless of whether you win. Make the decision now, before the next provocation arrives. Your peace is non-negotiable, not a prize to be protected if circumstances allow. A boundary you enforce on your own behalf, consistently, regardless of what is on the other side of it. The person who cannot be baited into trading their peace for the satisfaction of retaliation is a person who has achieved something genuinely rare. Achieve it. Protect it. It is worth more than every victory they could have offered you. Law 15. Let every hard moment leave you harder to break. This is the law that transforms everything that came before it from philosophy into compounding armor. Every confrontation you have ever navigated, every provocation you absorbed, every hostile encounter you survived, every moment of pressure that tested your composure and found some version of it still standing, has deposited something in you. Some small, real, permanent increase in the density of your resistance. Some evidence stored in your nervous system and your self-concept that you have been here before and you did not break. The question is whether that process has been happening consciously or by accident. Whether you have been deliberately extracting the lesson and the strength from every difficult encounter, or simply weathering it and moving on, leaving most of its potential value untouched. Marcus Aurelius was deliberate about this to a degree that borders on extraordinary. Every night, in the privacy of his own reflection, he reviewed the day, not to congratulate himself on what went well, but to examine honestly what was tested, what held, what cracked, what needed attention. He did this not from self-criticism, but from the deep and genuine conviction that the examined life is the only life in which real growth is possible, and that real growth is the only thing worth pursuing. That practice, the deliberate, consistent, honest review of your emotional performance under pressure, is the engine that converts difficulty into development. It is what ensures that every confrontation you face makes you slightly, measurably, permanently harder to break than the one before. Not because you become less human, not because you feel less, but because you understand more about yourself, about your vulnerabilities, about your strengths. And that understanding is armor of the most durable kind. Do this. After every confrontation that mattered, every moment of pressure that genuinely tested you, take 10 minutes. Ask what was tested and how you performed. Ask where the composure held and where it cracked. Ask what the crack revealed and what you will build there. Commit to one specific action that the confrontation has made clear is necessary. And carry forward not the bitterness of what was done to you, but the strength of what it made you build. Because the version of you that this process produces, over months and years of consistent, deliberate transmutation of hostility into growth, is not a person who endures pressure. They are a person who is no longer reachable by it. 15 laws, and underneath every single one of them, one truth. The only person who can control you is the person you give control to. You have been giving it away, not maliciously, not stupidly, because nobody ever showed you the mechanism, because the gap between provocation and response, the gap where your freedom actually lives, was closing so fast you never knew it was there. Now you know it is there. Now you know how to step into it. The provocateur who reads your insecurities like a map. That map is yours to redraw. The reactive habit that has been handing your composure to whoever applies pressure. That habit is yours to replace. The self-worth that has been living in the volatile market of other people's opinions. That is yours to relocate, permanently, somewhere they cannot reach. This is what Stoicism built across 2,000 years and the most extreme conditions human beings have ever faced. Not detachment, not coldness, not the armor of someone who has learned not to feel. The armor of someone who feels everything and is moved by nothing that does not deserve to move them. Marcus Aurelius chose this every single day from the throne of the most powerful empire in the world. Epictetus chose it from the chains of the most powerless position in that same world. Seneca chose it facing exile, persecution, and a death sentence. They chose it because they understood something that the people who tried to break them never did. You cannot control a person who has taken back control of themselves. Take it back. Right now. With the next breath. With the next pause. With the next moment someone reaches for your composure and finds, for the first time, that it is no longer available. That moment is coming. You are ready for it. If this hit you where it needed to, share it. Someone in your life is being controlled right now by someone who doesn't deserve that power. Drop a comment and tell me which of these 15 laws you are putting into practice today. And subscribe, because absolute calm is not a destination. It is a direction. And we are walking it together. Stop letting them control you. The laws are yours now. See you in the next one.